it's pretty much like, I don't think it could go higher. The thermometer would explode. I think it's big. It's pretty powerful.
Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. You just heard Magali Rochette on the state of CX fever, and that was following her win at the Pan Am Cyclocross Championships in Midland, Ontario. We're going to have more from Midland in this episode, but first, hello Dan, how are you doing?
Hello Matthew. The people want to know. They have one question for you.
What's that?
Did you kiss the goose?
I did not kiss the goose. The goose kissing is for people on the podium. And there were many smooches to be had. But
none from you though.
That would be presumptuous of me. That'd be like me putting on the jersey or something. You got to earn that goose smooch. But there were some, actually, oddly enough, there were some winners, Pan Am champions, who didn't kiss the goose. I know.
How dare they?
That's like not getting a tattoo at Single Speed Worlds or something.
Yeah, no sleeves at Single Speed Worlds, no Olympic tattoo after going to the Olympics, not kissing the Stanley Cup. It's up there.
It's up there. Also in this episode, we have an interview with Ted Glenn. He's a Toronto professor and writer, and his recent book is called Riding into Battle, and it chronicles Canadian bicycle-based soldiers during the First World War.
Do we think they were picky about their group sets?
Yeah, that's right. They were all like...
It's like, this is 6-speed.
I like 105. It's durable, but it'd be nice to have Ultegra.
Probably not.
We have no record of that. And finally, we're going to go back to Milton, Ontario. Just a few weeks ago, there was the World Cup of track cycling.
Yeah, that was my first time at the Milton World Cup. Or seeing any track cycling, and that is super impressive. Mm-hmm. They not only go crazy fast, but I saw the sprinters go crazy slow as they do the cat and mouse game during the match sprints.
Yeah, and we're actually not going to hear from any of those sprinters, but we have an interesting interview trackside. All right, on with the show. While there was lots of professional cyclocross action at the Pan Am Cyclocross Championships in Midland, Ontario, there were also amateur riders out. There were masters categories on both days of racing. One of those masters riders is Adam Killick, producer of this podcast. He met up with Michael Vandenham, a Canadian professional who got the silver medal in the elite men's race. And Michael shared some tips with Adam. Adam, set the scene for us and your meeting with Michael Vandenham.
So we the course came through this long muddy section and then dropped down onto the beach of Little Lake, and there were two sand sections each lap. And the first one, you kind of came down off the grass onto like a gentle turn onto the beach and rode along it for about 25 meters. But then there was a really tricky, hard 90-degree left turn off the sand and back up onto the grass, and that was really deeply rutted and tricky. And so I asked Michael if he could give me a few tips on how to not end up on the ground.
And sort of unfortunately for you, these tips came after your two races of the weekend.
That's true. It would have been helpful to have that on Saturday morning and not Sunday after my race, but I'll take what I can get, and I'll be there next year.
There you go. And these will serve you in your other races this year. So we'll hear about those tips and that advice live from the Silver Goose Pan Am Championships. And as you're listening, you will hear a drum ceremony in the background. This drum ceremony opened the elite races on both days. And it's very appropriate because in Little Lake Park, the site of the races, is also a Huron-Wendat village and ossuary. So let's hear from Michael Vandenham and Adam Killick.
Okay, so let's we can start here. Maybe let's just start on the hard pack. Sure. And we can talk about coming through this one here. All right. So a big part of what you're looking for in sand riding is not to get caught up in looking at the rut itself, but instead looking forward past the rut.
Yeah,
and
I do that. I kind of look at it and then I'm just kind of too clenched.
Exactly. You start looking down at it, or even worse, you start thinking about not riding the rut, and it turns out as soon as you start looking anywhere else but that. So yeah, you want to look down the rut, past the rut, and then when you're going out the corner, you want to be looking at the exit. Another thing is people often try to fight sand ruts. What we're really looking for is trust the rut that it's going to hold you, especially as they get deeper like this. Body weight a little bit back and let the bike go where it wants to go. Don't fight it, because that's when you're going to end up out of that rut and where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I found that because I was like either going over the rut and then really trying to have to force the bike back, throw the bike back into the course, or just putting the foot down.
Yeah, exactly. So looking where you want to go, relaxing a little bit out there, and just letting the rut take you where it's going. Don't fight it. So we ready to try to ride it here? And
Sure. You want to go first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Oh, man down. All right, so
How many people can I take out in one cry?
something didn't work there. What happened?
I actually went over the bars.
Oh, dug your front wheel in a little bit?
I came out of the rut this way.
Yeah.
And I think I tried to force it back.
So don't force it. You're not steering with a rut. Another thing I didn't mention is you're not steering with your front. You're steering with the back tire as much. The rut will take the front wheel around. Weight wants to be a little bit further back.
Okay.
All right, should we try it again?
Yeah.
Okay. One more time. Nice. Awesome. Yeah.
Weight back a bit more.
Exactly, and it's like I actually dabbed coming out of that one. It's totally fine. I mean, it's going to cost you a split second, but still you're committing to that rut, letting it take you around, and then you can get on the gas right away when it's done, but keeping that weight back and kind of relaxing the upper body. You can react so much more to what's going on out there.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Perfect.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael Vandenham is an elite cyclocross racer on Garneau Easton presented by Transitions Life Care. Adam Killick is the producer of this podcast and a masters racer, diving, sometimes literally, into his first year of cyclocross.
You win! You won the race!
This year marks the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. When you think of that war, the technology that often comes to mind is bayonets, exploding artillery shells, mustard gas, maybe even some of the first tanks ever used in battle, and even biplanes. But one piece of technology that was there is the bicycle. It sounds a bit weird, especially for a war that didn't see a lot of movement, saw soldiers in muddy trenches, but the bicycle was there, and a Toronto professor and writer, Ted Glenn, investigated the bicycle's role in this war, and he looked into the soldiers, especially the Canadian ones, and the role they played in the First World War. In Glenn's newly released book, Riding into Battle, he chronicles the role that the Canadian soldiers played, and especially the combat cyclists, in the First World War. Ted, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate being here.
What led you to write this book?
There's a couple. I think there's a personal component, and I think there's more of a research component. The personal component is I work at Lakeshore campus, and I live at roughly St. Clair and Dufferin, and I've been biking to work for 16 years, and part of my bike route is down the Humber River Valley. And so when I happened on this story of the cyclists, I was doing some research on another project about Toronto in the immediate Great War era. And there was this clipping I saw of cyclists. I'm like, the what? Right? Bikes, First World War, trenches. I didn't expect it. So all of a sudden it's like, okay. So then when I started doing some more work and research and trying to understand who they are, what they did, I understood that the roughly 1,100 cyclists did all of their training here in Toronto. And they were based at Camp Exhibition, what we now affectionately know as the... it used to be the government building, but is now Medieval Times. And they did a lot of training up and down the Humber Valley. And they did something called the Battle of the Humber. So working for Humber College and having cycling, I know that terrain, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this is a really cool story because I see it. I know what that's like.
So that area where we now see, parks and bike paths or multi-use trails, that was a place for soon-to-be soldiers, soon-to-be men going to the front to train?
These battles of the Humber some of them were 6,000-7,000 troops. Those based at Camp Exhibition, others out in the east and west ends of the city, and they would do these day-long mock training exercises in the Humber. Elsewhere as well in Toronto, but that was one of the key places.
Interesting. So, bicycles and combat. I think you sort of alluded to your wait a second moment. When did the bicycle enter combat?
Well, actually, if the history of bikes in combat actually go back to the Prussian War in the 1860s. They were, started to be used as messengers back then, but then they really got used in the Boer War. They were a real common way of troops on all sides as scouts, as messengers. In the Great War, the cyclists, though, really came to the fore in the last 100 days. So the last 100 days, starting in August, going to November 1918, that's when they really came into their own. They came into their own because for most of the war, it was a trench war. And the cyclists didn't really do much. They, at Vimy, there's these great quotes of these poor guys who, bikes having been parked way back, just acting as tunnelers. And just, one guy says, I think our job there was to carry out half the ridge in buckets. So they weren't biking. But when the 100 days came, and the Battle of Amiens on August 8th started it, the Allies in general pushed the German troops, blasted them up out of the trenches and had them on the run going back towards Belgium. And when they had them on the run, the cyclist job, along with this group called Brutinel's Brigade, and there was the Canadian Motor Machine Gun Brigade, there was Canadian Light Cavalry, so horse troop, there was motorcycles, there was the bikes, there was some mortar trench lorries, and these guys, their job was to stay out way ahead of the main army and keep the Germans on the run. They had to what was called keep in touch so that they wouldn't retrench. So at times, the cyclists and their compatriots were out a day, 2 days ahead of the main army, trying to push the Germans back and make sure that they didn't have time to retrench.
So the cyclists were like the speediest guys on the battlefield.
As long as the roads were okay.
As long as the roads were bombed out.
Well, so the Germans got, they got tricky in those last 100 days. In the first little while, the Canadians made some great advances, but as they started going back and they realized that the roads and the cavalry off in the fields and stuff were reporting back to the Canadian Corps on their positions, because that was one of their jobs, report back on German positions. They started bombing the roads. So that would slow them down. So this group, this Brutinel's Brigade, they were an independent force, and they actually had their own engineering section. And these guys would go out, and the cyclists and everybody else, they'd patch the roads, fix the mine holes and stuff, and then they'd be off. But they were quite a crew.
So tell me, who gave the brigade that name, or who's the name?
A guy by the name of Raymond Brutinel, and he was a Frenchman, came to Canada to make his fortune at the end of the 19th century, and it was him that and Charles Sifton who actually had this idea for motorized warfare. And so they went out and they bought 20 motorized armored vehicles. One of them is in the Canadian War Museum. And because of his real advanced thinking on the subject of mobile warfare, combined arms, he was given this brigade. And they really are a harbinger of a lot of what happens in the Second World War. And the bikes were part of it.
Interesting. When you think of the First World War, you think of trenches. You don't think a lot of motion or movement. You do associate that maybe with the Second World War. So help me position those cyclists in this war of trenches and sitting in muck. Like, how are those bikes being used amongst
they weren't.
that?
Basically,
as you said in Vimy, right?
Yeah, I mean, so what ended up happening a lot of the time is the cyclists did other duties as assigned. Right. They would do patrol. They would guard prisoners. They would use their bikes to run messages from the trenches back to headquarters, and so they were basically just minding their time. But really, that last 100 days, as Jack Granstein has put, I mean, that was Canada's greatest victory. Vimy was good, but from a strategic point of view, it didn't accomplish much on the front. It was the 100 days, though, that really put Canada on the map as this really incredible, efficient fighting force. And the cyclists' contribution to it was that it was mobile.
Interesting. And so this is maybe the first look at modern mobile warfare.
Certainly.
Interesting. Tell me about the bikes.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of different bikes that are used. So when they start out in Canada, they're on bikes that are called Planets, and they're made in a shop on Queen East, and eventually CCM buys them out.
Right.
But the president of the company, Tommy Richardson, I think is his name, he ends up getting this great sweet deal to sell bikes to the Canadian government, right? And so he ends up selling us about 1,200 bikes, 1,200 Planets. So most of the training that's done in Canada after the first division ships out, they're done on Planets and around town. And it's a 24-inch frame. They've got coaster hubs, mud flaps. They've got pannier rigging on the back and the front. But they've also got clips for Hotchkiss 303 machine gun to mount on the handlebars. Another one to put an Enfield rifle up the frame.
Interesting.
So they're all kitted out. But by the time they get to the war, though, the Planets end up being a little bit too light duty.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean the men like them because they're light. But then what ends up happening is they go with the British Small Arms Company, BSA, another 24-inch frame, but it's much sturdier, and it's the British standard that the Aussies, the Kiwis are riding, the Brits are riding, the Indians are riding, and so that ends up being mostly what the troops are riding in the battlefield.
And do you have a sense of what lighter and heavier meant for those frames?
I can't figure that out. I haven't been able to find that specific information. I don't know how heavy that is. But I do know when they loaded up with kit, got their rain ponchos and their great coats and their guns, it's about 90 pounds.
That's like a whole other professional cyclist.
Well, there's
a professional cyclist.
So when they first got off the trains in France, and the original kit, right, what headquarters said you must have. These guys get off the train. They've got their bikes, and one guy says they look like a haystack. They've got so much crap on their bikes. I mean, they figure it out by a few years in. They figure out what's needed, what they don't need. Always make sure you got a spare. You have your tire changing kits. You have your basics, and they can cut that weight down. But at the beginning, it's pretty crazy.
When you were researching this book, what maybe detail or item really surprised you?
The humor.
I find that surprising.
The humor. The book, a large part of the book is informed by the work of a guy named Dick Ellis. And he was a Toronto fellow, born and raised, was the last living member of the cyclists, died in 1996. But over the course of his life, he put together a number of different divisional histories. And he also started a 2 or 3 episodic journal, and which goes for almost 50 years. And the journal has all of these cyclists writing in, telling stories. Do you remember this? Guess what this was like? And they send in all this great paraphernalia of their time, and in their diaries. And there's all this humor that's there. And as one of them said at some point, he says, without that sense of humor, we wouldn't have made it through. Like there's this great story at Vimy of one of the cyclists. So Vimy has this, the fight above the ground, but then there's also the fight below with all the tunnels going on, right? And the idea was on both sides is, dig the tunnel underneath the other guy's tunnel and blow it up. But in order to do that, it took some time because it's all by hand and they had to be very quiet. So they sent one of the cyclists out to kind of guard the tunnels one night. So he's out there, deep in the dark, and he's got a candle. And he's going through, and the candle goes out, and he goes, oh, that might be dangerous gas. So he goes down another tunnel, lights the candle again, has a cigarette, and it's like, dude, you just said there's. So he's down there. He's got this stethoscope on, basically listening for movement, and all of a sudden, he has to go to the washroom, and of course he can't go anywhere else. So he just lets loose there in the tunnel. And he's still got a stethoscope on it. And all of a sudden he thinks that one of the dams has burst, and all of a sudden it's, he's going to get flooded out. And then he realizes, no, he's just got a stethoscope on. So he takes this off. So anyways, you find all of these kind of crazy stories of these guys. And it's this humor. There's another great story, second division, when they're at Chiselden, they're at camp. And at that time, their captain is a guy by the name of Tom Kennedy, who becomes the 15th Premier of Ontario. And he's based at Cookstown. And so they're out riding one day, and they come across what they call a group of bathing beauties. And as the cyclist said, the bathing beauties' attire in Britain was a little different. It's a little more progressive than it was at Canada at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so they had this massive crash up. The bikes all running into each other because everybody wants to have a see. And so they had, bent wheels, and spent the rest of the day trying to get the bikes sorted out.
I wonder how they explained that one.
But it's that kind of stuff, right? That it was just completely surprising as how funny these guys were.
And when did the bicycle take its leave from combat? When did it retire or just cease to appear?
It's a good question. I don't know that. I mean, if you follow into the Second World War, they're used even more so than the First World War. But technology has evolved. So you've got, for example, the paratroopers with their folding bikes. They jump. U.S. Army had about 120,000 of them.
Really?
There's these great stories during the Vietnam War of the Viet Cong on the Ho Chi Minh Trail with their bikes. So I don't know exactly, but I know they continued on for a while.
I guess maybe they continue on. They don't have an official battalion to them, but they still find themselves in battle. Ted, thank you very much.
Oh, that's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Ted Glenn is a professor at Humber College in Toronto. His recent book is Riding into Battle, about the Canadian combat cyclists in the First World War. Dan, both you and I, very recently, were at the Mattamy National Cycling Centre. Yes, thank you. In Milton, Ontario. And there was some pretty cool action on the boards.
Yeah, that was my first time seeing any real track racing. And I got to say, that is a completely different discipline than any road stuff I've seen. They go both super slow in the sprint, super fast in the sprint. And if you're not careful, you'll literally reach out and get knocked over by some of those sprinters on the boards.
Yeah, you don't want to lean in too closely. It was the UCI World Cup event, and it was a 3-day event. We were there on day 2. You were there a bit earlier than me. You were during the early sessions.
So I saw some of the sprint heats, and I saw the early races of the men's Omnium. Seeing that many people on the track is absolutely bonkers. Just the 40 guys coming in and out of the peloton. There's like a certain poetry to that motion where they're all on the same gearing. They have no brakes, so it's just a rhythm to it. Is really cool to watch.
Yeah. And I feel like for track cycling, it really helps to be there and just spend that 3 hours at a morning or early session or late evening session and just soak in the vibe and soak in the racing. At the evening session, it was pretty exciting because Canada got a medal in the women's Madison, and Hugo Barrett was pretty cool to watch in the final heat of the keirin. He launched crazy early. It looked like he could hold off Jason Kenney, but he got a very emphatic silver.
Now, that's a cool story, but I think the real hero of the keirin, the man in front of Hugo and Jason Kenney at the start.
Yes, the man who was keeping them back. I spoke with the coach at the Milton Velodrome. He works with Canadian athletes in the Next Gen program. He works with junior riders at the provincial level, and he organizes some of the races there. But he's also a derny driver. And he has a pretty interesting story about how he kind of got further into the world of keirin. He was in Japan. He went through the wrong door and got surrounded by what he calls goons, but it all turned out pretty good.
So my name's David Jack. I'm one of the coaches here at the Milton Velodrome. I work with sort of all level of athletes. Did a bunch of work with Cycling Canada this year with their next gen riders. Took them to Europe to do some track racing and some road racing in Belgium, and then worked with them for the Pan American Games and right up to the World Cup here. Very, very happy with a lot of the work that they did. They got a lot of personal bests, and one of our riders, Evan, came fifth in the scratch race yesterday, which was a really good result for a young rider. So yeah, a little bit of stuff with Cycling Canada. Then I work with Ontario Cycling Association with some of their junior and cadet high performance programs here. And then also one of the main coaches with the National Cycling Institute Milton, NCIM. Work a lot with the high performance youth groups, as well as some of the advanced classes. Since I'm the motorbike guy, I do a lot of motor pacing with athletes on the track. And then I'm also one of the race organizers for the NCIM race nights.
And what are you going to be doing here at Milton at the World Cup tonight?
Tonight, I'm the derny driver for the keirin.
And how long have you been driving a derny on the track?
Steve Bauer, when Milton first opened, Steve Bauer asked me to be one of the drivers, just I had a lot of motorcycle experience. And I actually even have experience with keirin in Japan, and that I lived in Japan late 90s, early 2000s. And my first 2 years there, I lived near one of their tracks and got to train with their keirin riders a little bit. So that was kind of fun. I'm not a sprinter either, so it's kind of weird. I used to be like a semi-professional photographer, and I couldn't read anything in Japanese, and I ended up going through like the wrong door one day and got surrounded by goons. And it turned out I went through like where the rider's entrance was, and because it's gambling and it was race day, you're not supposed to be near the riders because something bad might be going on, right? So got really, really lucky in that one of the guys spoke a little bit of English. I talked to him a little bit, and I went back with like a translated letter saying, this is what I've done in the past with track racing. Can I train with you guys? And they said, sure. Here's a track bike. Let's ride. So I trained with them like 2 or 3 times a week for about 2 years. It's kind of fun. Very, very different culture. They all make money. Even the lowest level riders make quite a bit of money. A lot of them smoke, which is kind of weird. So in the training group that I had, maybe only 2 of them didn't smoke because it was bizarre. A lot of them had big beer bellies and stuff.
And these are athletes that people bet on.
Yeah. But there's different levels of racing. Like they have different tiered racing. The guys in the lowest level of racing know that they're never going to be the best, so it's just a regular job for them, right?
Tell me about the art of driving a derny. What does maybe your average fan or just casual watcher of track cycling in the keirin, what should she or he know about what you're doing out there on the track?
So in Japan, where keirin started, it's a sport where there's gambling, and it's like horse racing. And the derny driver there actually doesn't use a motorcycle; he's actually riding a bicycle. And over there's in modern keirin, there's a guy in a tower that has a radio, and he talks to the guy that's doing the pacing, and he tells the guy to speed up or where to come off, because it's a little bit different in Japan in that they can come off the track in different spots. So the guy in the tower is trying to make it as exciting as possible and make it go whatever way he wants it to go. When he's watching the race. With UCI level stuff, they added the motorbike. Over the years, they've made multiple changes. I watched a video a couple weeks ago that I'd actually seen many times of when Gord Singleton won his World Championship keirin, and there were like 9 riders on the track at that time, which is what they have in Japan. But Japanese tracks, almost all of them are 400 meters, so a lot more room. Most of them are also outdoors. The 400 meters, so they can have them banked so that even if it's raining, they don't fall off, which is weird to watch track racing in the rain. Anyhow, so my job, the job of the derny is one to get the riders up to speed. So when I come across the line where they're lined up, I'm doing 30 kilometers an hour, and then I have to incrementally pick it up to 50 kilometers an hour for over 3 laps for when I come off. And the UCI representative that's looking after me here, he actually times every heat that we do to make sure that I'm on schedule, so nobody has any sort of advantage, and so I'm not, gassing anybody because I've accelerated too quickly. The other big important thing that a lot of people don't understand about the motorbike in keirin is the motorbike's actually there to keep people from attacking, because you can't pass the motorbike until the motorbike comes off with 3 to go. So half of the job is in match sprint, someone can go right from the gun. In keirin, you have to wait till the motorbike gets out of the way. So that with keirin right now on a 250-meter track, being 6 laps total, if the motorbike wasn't there, then people could just attack right from the gun, and it'd be a totally different race. So it's probably one of the least understood things, that people think that the motorcycle is there just to get people going like 100 kilometers an hour, but it's more to keep them back than to actually get them going fast. Having the motorbike gradually pick up speed does allow them to use bigger gears.
And tell me actually about the bike. Is it it's an electric bike?
Yeah, the bikes that we have here in Milton are electric. It's depending where you are in the world and how old the facilities are. A bunch of the races I was in Europe, they're still using the really old derny bikes, like 2-stroke derny bikes, where it's got a huge gear that people are actually pedaling. At one of the tracks in Germany this summer, the guy has to actually start on the rail on the far side and do a full lap and a half before they can start the race, for him to get up to the right speed to start the race. Our bikes are electric, which are nice for the indoors compared to the 2-stroke smoke that people get. Some of the classic keirin people don't like that there's no noise with the electric ones, because the noise gets people revved up and excited, but we have music for that, so it's all good.
All right, David Jack, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
David Jack is a coach and derny driver at the Mattamy National Cycling Centre in Milton, Ontario. And that's the episode, but we still have lots more from Midland, Ontario, where we saw the Pan Am Cyclocross Championships. Of particular interest, which you should check out, is something from our web editor, Terry McCall. He usually covers mountain biking, that's his main beat, but he's also a really good cyclocross racer. And where did he find himself, Dan?
Yeah, so our man was in the elite race, hanging on with the goal of trying to see what he could do, see how many laps he could hang with the leaders. He's got some great GoPro footage of that, so that's going up this week on cyclingmagazine.ca.
Yes.
The man's also got great bike checks from the pro race. We got Magali Rochette's coming up. Stephen Hyde's up there. A couple other great pros. Check that out.
Yes, always double check with our website. And also, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us at podcast@cyclingmagazine.ca. This episode was put together by Dan Walker, Philippe Tremblay, Terry McCall, and me, Matthew Piero. It's produced by Adam Killick.
And if you want to know more, check us out at Cycling Magazine on Instagram, at Cycling Magazine on Twitter, and at Cycling Mag on Facebook. Remember, like, review, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your mom, but only if it's 5 stars and only if it's something nice.
Yes, please, we really do appreciate those reviews. Also, special thanks to the Ontario Media Development Corporation for its support. We'll see you next time.